Hello and good afternoon, everyone. It's so nice to see so many of you here, back for another one of our weekly UniAdmissions webinars. Yeah, so it's just me today. So if you don't enjoy the sound of my voice, sorry. Thankfully for you, there are the subtitles, so you can always just put me on mute and just read, which may be your preference. I'm going to be talking today about applying to study medicine before we come back and talk about personal statements next week. For those of you who haven't been to one of these before, my name is Matt. I look after our research team here at UniAdmissions, and my job is to make sure that all of the ideas, the insights, the resources we produce, everything we put out there is based in fact and in evidence, and it's stuff that we know is going to work. Sorry, just had a distracting message. So what if you want to be a doctor? I've sort of split up this advice into three areas. The first of those are the reasons you might want to study meds, which we're going to talk a little bit about. We're going to talk about what it takes to get that place at medical school, and we're going to talk a little bit about the support that we're able to offer here at UniAdmissions, the kind of range of things that we do. Now, in terms of why you want to study medicine, I'm sure you all have your own intrinsic motivations. One thing to be aware of is that the popularity of medicine has absolutely exploded over the last couple of years. No idea why, enormous mystery. Don't think there's been any medicine in the news. So that's something to be aware of, which is the number of students applying to study medicine has really gone up. And at the same time, the rate at which students are getting the top grades at A-level has also gone up. Now, of course, we all know this is down to the different ways in which students have been assessed over the past years. And so there's a possibility the level of achievement will come back down to the kind of 2015 era trend. But what it means is that for students like yourselves who are applying on the basis of GCSEs done during the height of the pandemic, it's going to be a lot harder for universities to use these as evidence toward their application than it used to be. As this graph shows, the share of students getting the top marks at GCSE has almost doubled over the past 20 years, and that's a really important factor to take into account when it comes to understanding how universities make these admissions decisions. What you have to think is the universities are trying to figure out which students are more and less capable, and the less the variation there is in exam results, the harder it is for them to tell. The way we like to think of this is through a pie chart. So we tend to think that your A-level predictions and your results at GCSE will end up having a smaller impact on your application, particularly for medicine, than your score on the admissions test. You've got the personal statement, school reference, those things also play a part. But it's really the admissions test and the interview that make up the really vast majority of the outcome. And the thing to remember here is, because this does sound a little bit scary, is that you do still have complete control over your performance in the admissions test and in the interview. And so actually, this is almost an advantage at this stage, because you are still in control of so much of what you've done. And because of the way that GCSEs have gone the last couple of years, those marks, if they were brilliant, that's going to look good. But if they were slightly less than brilliant, that's not going to cause you any trouble either. Now, broadly speaking, if you're applying for medicine, you're going to need a handful of things. You're going to need to have good GCSEs, but I'm sure all of you do. I didn't have particularly good GCSEs, but it was a long time ago. You'll want to be studying 3 STEM A-levels for most medical schools. And we'll come to talk about A-level subjects again in a moment. You'll want to have some work experience, whether that's in medicine or in social care more broadly. It doesn't need to have been you shadowing a GP. You don't need to have been hanging around in surgical theatre. Even just work in a care setting volunteering around the vaccine rollout, anything like that will cover it. It's not about having really learned anything about medicine per se. It's about having a context of personal experience that you can use to demonstrate your motivation. You're going to want to have some really good A-level predictions, because almost all medical schools are going to want AAA at a minimum, a lot of them A star and 2As. And you're going to want some great scores on the 2 admissions tests to make sure that you are getting through to that interview stage. That'll be a big part of whether you get there or not. When it comes to choosing your A-levels, you're going to have to do chemistry. I imagine most of you, if you're applying in September, have already picked, so hopefully you have picked chemistry. And you'll also want to take another science, whether that's biology or physics or maths. A lot of medical schools, it's compulsory to do biology as well as chemistry, but you can occasionally get away without doing biology. Now, the thing I tend to say here is, if you think you've outsmarted the medical school by studying chemistry but not biology, the bad news is once you get to university, you'll have to study the biology anyway. There's an awful lot of biology involved in medicine. So I would say, clever as it might seem to avoid it at this stage, you're going to have to learn it eventually. So I would tend to do it from the beginning. And whether you choose to do physics or maths alongside, that's really up to you. Again, you're going to have to do it once you get to university anyway to study medicine. So you're better off having had the experience all the way through. I spoke very briefly a moment ago about work experience. That work experience doesn't have to be in a hospital. That work experience can be really any science, any care-based setting. A lot of students are going to have struggled to find work experience. I'm sure that will be the case for most, if not all of you, and that's fine. Universities are well aware of this. And so whether you've done some virtual work experience, whether all you've been able to do is something that isn't as medicine related, that's all fine. It's all about understanding your motivation and being able to put that forward. Essentially, you want to find out that you really do want to be a doctor, because a lot of being a doctor is gross. Hardly any of it's the glamorous stuff that you'll have seen in episodes of House. What you want to be doing is making sure that it's the right area for you and that you can show that passion through not just your words, but also your actions. So I'm going to talk next a little bit about how the admissions tests work, which hopefully is the part you're all most interested in, because it certainly is the part that's most exciting to me, because I'm strange that way. So the first test is the BMAT. This takes place in November. There used to be an earlier sitting in September, but that's been got rid of now. And this is the test for Oxford and Cambridge, but also for Imperial, Leeds, UCL, and a few others. I believe that slightly fewer medical schools use the BMAT than the Ucat, which we'll talk about in a second. But generally speaking, students do both and then make a decision as to which universities to apply to based on how well they feel they've done in the Ucat, because that's the one that comes first. The two exams are very different. The BMAT is, I would say, more conventionally academic. It tests your verbal and numerical reasoning in the first part, and then has a set of scientific knowledge questions and an essay in the second part. The interesting thing about the Ucat, this is the BMAT, is that the test is the same for everyone, and so we're able to make very effective comparisons in terms of score. What we see is, and I've highlighted the data here for Ucat for section 1 rather than section 2, is it, although we see the same pattern, the curves are a little bit smoother here. What we see is that the relationship between the score you get on the BMAT and the chance of you getting an offer, there's a really strong correlation, but also the difference question by question is enormous. Getting an extra 2 or 3 questions right in the BMAT can really push your score from average to above average and really get you into that kind of offer zone really efficiently. I think a lot of students don't necessarily realize this about the BMAT, but every question counts, and I'm still trying to get hold of the data for the analysis on it, but my suspicion is that students are much better at answering question 1 than they are at answering question 32. And so being on top of little psychological hacks like that can make a really big difference to your success rate. You know, if you are looking at the exact same probability on every question rather than a higher probability at one end than at the other, there are real ways to improve your BMAT score. And the same really goes for the Ucat, which I'm going to talk about now. So the Ucat is the test used by King's, Exeter, Glasgow, Bristol, I think, a bunch of other places. It's also used in the Southern Hemisphere. So if you're thinking of going to Australia or New Zealand, then they've recently changed their test to what they call the Ucat ANZ. It's the same test, they've just stuck ANZ on the end to feel local. Now, although it's the same time frame as the BMAT, the Ucat is very different. It does have the same verbal and quantitative reasoning sections, so the maths and the reading comprehension, but it also has sections on abstract reasoning and decision making. The abstract reasoning in particular is a lot of shapes and rotations and things like that. It's something I find impossible, but it's a slightly more unusual test, and so it really rewards revision and preparation because it is quite different from anything you'll have done at school, whereas the BMAT, particularly in section 2, the science section, is very similar to the kind of thing you'd have studied at GCSE and A level. The other thing to know about the Ucat is it is different every time. There will be a bank of hundreds of Ucat questions in the computer. It will then pick a selection of them for you to sit. And so your Ucat will be different from another person's Ucat, which does make making comparisons between yourself and other people sitting the test much more difficult. But it does give you a lot more flexibility about when you sit it, because there isn't the same opportunity for you to tell your mates the answers. If I remember correctly, the Ucat is something that you can start sitting as of, if not the end of this month, and the beginning of next month. And so preparing well and getting in there early is a good idea, particularly if you are unsure which universities you're going to apply to. Giving the Ucat plenty of revision time is a good idea, especially now that the BMAT isn't until November, so you can really give the Ucat your full focus over the course of the summer. The way in which students progress through the Ucat is fairly smooth. What you will see is that students are, on the whole, best at the quantitative part. They find the abstract part a little bit harder, and students tend to score the lowest in the verbal reasoning section, which is interesting. But as you can see, there's a very clear, a lovely large R, as the correlation between each of the sections are very strong. We don't see that students who are better at one thing tend to be worse than another. It tends to be that being better makes you better all round. Once you've sat the Ucat, you will get a score report, which will look something like this. This is for a student who's done quite well. I say we're getting all 600s there. So if we compare this to the information we've got here, that would suggest that they were at the lower end for the quantitative reasoning, but much closer to the top half when it comes to the situational judgment and the verbal reasoning. So I think they've done all right. The really important thing here, though, is the situational judgment test. Scores here are banded into 4 from the top score, where you have broadly agreed with the people who are doing the marking, down to the band 4, which is the lowest score, where you seem to be disagreeing with the experienced clinician a lot. So what do the universities do with the Ucat? Very few of them use it as a hard cutoff score. Now, if you've scored really badly, probably you're not going to get an interview, but for the most part, there isn't a rule where universities will say, okay, students who scored below this level, we're going to ignore the applications, throw them in the bin. However, if you have scored in the bottom section for the situational judgment test, often that will happen. And this makes sense, I think. All of the other sections, there is a lot more scope for people to be, vary. That the situational judgment, your ability to do what other doctors would think is right, is so important, and there are quite a few ethics questions hidden in there. If you're really one of the weaker students when it comes to that judgment, then they're probably not going to consider your application further. So that's something to really bear in mind when you're planning your revision. The universities pretty much all have different systems for how they do their shortlisting. Some of them are very open and clear about it. The University of Birmingham has a lovely big spreadsheet that you can look at, whereas others are quite opaque. I know that King's don't particularly explain what they're doing. It's worth having a look before you apply, but don't let that be the reason that you choose one university over the other. You always want to be picking somewhere you actually want to go. A strange mistake students sometimes make. And the thing to remember here is that for most universities where they've told us about these things, they will weight the Ucat at a higher weight than your GCSEs. So if you're not super happy with your GCSEs, then this is a really good opportunity to take a step forward and to get a really good result in the Ucat. Now, if this all goes to plan, you'll get yourself an interview. Now, these are a long way off, very, 9 months away almost? So I'm not going to spend very long talking about interviews today. But just to say that your classic interview will be in the MMI format for almost all of these universities, apart from Oxford and Cambridge. And in the MMI, you'll be given a series of little interviews, multiple mini interviews, they call it. And each of these will test a different aspect of your application, whether that's your ability to give and to receive instructions, to work through graph-based problems, to deal with particular situations. And they even hire in actors to do a little bit of role play with you sometimes. So you may have a mini interview that consists of an encounter with a difficult patient, which I'm sure is a very authentic representation of the doctor experience, having a difficult patient. The kinds of questions you might be asked, these are all drawn from the last few years of interviews. There might be questions about the big picture of medicine, how technology has changed things. There might be a really specific scenario where you have to try and understand different questions, where you imagine yourself as a junior doctor. You might have a question about the role of doctors in society. My personal favorite question is the trick question, where they will get you to try and trick you into saying something bad about nurses by asking you why you want to be a doctor instead of a nurse. The mistake people will make is they'll say, because being a doctor is much more important, which of course is the wrong answer. Being a nurse is more important. Everyone knows that. And there may even be questions about your work experience, even if that isn't directly medicine related. Again, they're trying to understand your motivation, the part of you inside that wants to become a doctor. And so that could be to do with volunteering work, to do with family experiences, anything you have that can kind of be brought forward to clarify your motivation for the subject. So I hope that's been helpful. Normally, one of my colleagues would talk through the next part, but I'm going to give it a go. I hope that the information we've shared with you today has been really helpful in terms of thinking about your application to study medicine. But there is more we can do. If you would like to get some additional support from us, then we do offer a series of programs. Each one of these is tailored to the student to make sure that you get the support you need for your application. That includes one-to-one tuition provided by a current student in the subject and at the university that you're studying, so that you can get really up-to-date insights into how to improve your application, how to prepare for your interview, and how to really focus on the areas that you need to improve. And each of those sessions comes with a detailed report alongside it, which we also share with parents, as I know what teenagers can be like when it comes to communication. We also have a huge library of resources. We develop our own resources in-house. We have tens of thousands of pages of practice questions, interview preparation, available both in our books, which you can buy on Amazon or receive directly from us, and through our digital preparation portal, which gives you the chance to practice in an exam style setting, which is particularly valuable for the Ucat, a test that is computer based. And so we're able to really replicate what the feel of that is like, so that you can have really nothing that surprises you when you come to sit the Ucat, apart from what the questions are. because everything about the screen preparation, all of that will be very familiar to you. Every Sunday, we also run our enrichment seminars. These are really helpful preparation for the interview, as they give you the chance to look at different university level subjects, to discuss with peers, to really practice dealing with academic ideas at the appropriate level, and to really get a feel for the style of learning that you'll be doing at university, which is much more collaborative, much more engaged than the kind of thing you might be doing at A level. And as we get into the autumn, we also offer intensive day courses on each of the aspects of the application, whether that's the admissions test, the personal statement, getting ready for the interview. And those give you the chance to really focus and knuckle down onto that for a full day, maybe even 2 days in some cases, to really be ready, and a nice chance to meet some of the people who are going through the same experience as you, because that's something that's always nice to realize that you're not entirely alone. We're really proud to say that our approach seems to work. Our results compare really well with some of the top schools in the country, even the ones with funny outfits such as Eton. And the customer feedback we get on Trustpilot is also something that we're really proud of, and I would encourage you to go and have a look there if you're thinking of working with us. If you'd like to say something nice about me as well, then I would really appreciate that, because well, there's no one here to help me this week. And so I really appreciate any kind comments there as well. Now, if you have any further questions, please do get in touch with us directly through our website. That will where you can book a consultation, entirely commitment free and free of charge. That gives you the opportunity to have a direct conversation with myself, with one of my colleagues, to really work out what we can do to help you in your personal circumstances, and ensure that you're getting the right support. It may be that any questions you have are a little more detailed. We need to go away and do some research. We're more than happy to do that. All of that comes, as I said, free of charge, no commitment at all. It's just a case of getting to know you to figure out how we can help, if indeed we can help. You know, we've had students before who are more than ready enough and don't really need us, which is always a little disappointing. But in those cases, we don't begrudge them their inevitable success. Now I have a couple of minutes left where I can answer a few questions directly though. So if you want to drop those in the Q&A box now, I'm going to do those between now and past. Normally this would run a little longer, but with only me here today, unfortunately, I don't think my voice will be up to it. So please do drop those in and I'll get to half a dozen of those. So yeah, thank you, and I'll be back in a second. Hello again. Thank you for letting me have a quick break to refresh my throat. I've had a couple of questions from Emily and from Goran asking about cost. So the cost depends entirely on your personal circumstances, both the level of support you need, but also the situation you're coming from. We worked with very nearly 100 students last year on a completely free basis. And that's assessed based on your personal situation. So if you're worried about cost, please don't let that stand in the way of going to talk to us. If it's something you're worried about, it's almost certainly something we're worried about as well. But unfortunately, I'm not able to put a price on it, not least because I don't know, but also because it will depend on your personal situation and the level of support you require. It may be that you don't need very much help from us, and so we can, you know, it wouldn't end up being all that expensive. Fab. All right, then. I've got a few other slightly easier questions. Ali asks, can I sit the BMAT or Ucat in year 10? Yes, you can. And we strongly recommend doing this. The reason is because it's good practice. You get to find out what it's like. You get to find out how difficult it is. And it also gives you a nice baseline for your sense of improvement. If you do it a year or two early and you do really badly, that's fine. No harm done, but it gives you a nice place to start improving from, and it's something I always recommend. I haven't done it the last couple of years, but in the past I've gone and done the BMAT myself. As you can probably tell, I am not 17 or 18 years old anymore and haven't been for quite some time. But it helps keep me sharp in terms of the advice we're able to offer. So it's something I enjoy doing from time to time. Jennifer asks about applying from the US. You don't need to take the Ucat if you're only applying to BMAT universities. The universities only care about the test that they have specified in their admissions information. So a question we often get is from students is about the importance of other tests such as the SAT in the States. Universities don't care. It's nice that you've done your SAT. You can send them your SAT score if you like. They will not read it. They will be totally disinterested. The things they say they care about on the university website are genuinely the only things they care about. We have a few questions. Razvan has a question about, we have a couple of questions about international students. We had a couple of successful international students last year for medicine, but the thing to bear in mind there is the number of places is incredibly restricted in the UK. Many medical schools will only have 20 or 30 places available for international students, so it is extremely competitive. It's something we have experience in, and there has been success in years past, which we're more than happy to help with, but it's a real stretch, and you would need to be scoring, really spectacularly on the Ucat and the BMAT to make a competitive application as an international student. The question about work experience. Prashi suggests a charity shop. Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Anything where you are developing communication skills, if you're working particularly for a charity that has a medical side to it, whether it's a cancer research one or something like that, anything where you are going out, engaging with other people, demonstrating your commitment to, social good, all of those things are going to work well. Depending on the situation with COVID where you are, speak to old people's homes nearby, ask anyone who might work in the hospital. There may even be jobs just going and cleaning parts of the hospital, working as a support worker for elderly people. All of these things that demonstrate an interest in care are more than good enough. In fact, in my experience, admissions officers are going to be much more interested in a student who has spent 6 months doing something a little bit gross, something in care work, something in hospital cleaning, something like that, than a student who has been able to jet off to Switzerland and do something in a fancy clinic with PhD biologists all around them. Because one of those things shows how well connected your dad is, and one of them shows how committed you are to the experience of medicine. So don't be worried if what you're doing doesn't feel very glamorous. A lot of being a doctor isn't very glamorous, and so getting a little bit of practice for that is really helpful. And I said I would run till past, and that's what I've done. Please, if you have any further questions, if there's anything else we can help with, please get in touch directly through the consultation form that is hopefully animating in front of you. It's been lovely to speak to you all, but unfortunately, after 30 solid minutes, my voice is going. And I will catch up with you all next week when we'll be talking about personal statements. Please do join us again for that. And please have a lovely weekend and enjoy the sunshine if you're here in the UK, or whatever weather you have locally to you where you are. Thank you very much. Bye.